540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com's weekly sale. Head over to StarCityGames.com/sale and check out our gaming supply sale. From now until Sunday, February 6th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, you can save 50% on select gaming supplies. We're talking about an assortment of sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and more. You're a gamer, you need supplies, and you're bound to find a good deal at StarCityGames.com/sale. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting week of Cube content here on the 540 Star City Games' very own Cube podcast. I am Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter, and I'm joined once again by Ryan Saxe. Ryan, how are you?
Hey, y'all. I'm doing great, and you can find me at RC Saxe on Twitter.
This week, we are still in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty preview season. I think we'll know all the cards like within a day of this podcast going live. At the time of recording, we know a lot of cards, but we have nowhere near close to the whole set. So it's not time for a set review just yet. However, the week before we start doing the set reviews, I do like to kind of build some hype or relate the podcast in some way to the upcoming set. And I think that makes sense this week to talk about ninjas as an aspect of Cube. And as an archetype, we're going to do one of our archetypal deep dives. And some of this is, putting ninjas in your cube, but you're going to find out there's a lot more than that. In fact, both Ryan and I, we've both worked on ninjas in differing degrees as something that's kind of supported specific ninja cards in our cubes. And you do have some very specific ninja cards, but really this is kind of an evolution, a more recent chain, and kind of the blue fish archetype. Some older players might be familiar with that. I guess it originated, that's what they called merfolk decks because they're fish. It's a tribal deck. But then over time, decks that just played blue creatures, meddling mage was a quote unquote fish kind of card. And it's just blue decks that play more creatures than most blue decks, really is what a fish deck is. And so ninjas tends to have a lot with this deck name lineage of what a fish deck is, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense, but it really doesn't. But also that's okay. I mean, I've been playing Magic for a long time, but not like as part of the Magic community for most of that time, right? Like kitchen table kind of thing when I was a kid. And this is the first time I'm hearing a meddling mage be called a fish, but I get it. I get where it comes from. It's just a little jarring.
Yeah, I wanted to make that point about like historical decks, but then I when I like wrote it down and they're saying it out loud, I'm like, man, some people are just not going to they're not going to believe me or like what I'm saying.
Yeah, meddling mage. I mean, I'd buy it can swim, so fish got to swim. But I love, well, actually, something that I think we share, we've talked about this a little bit, is I'm usually like pretty attracted to cubes that have Dimir sections where it's like a creature deck. It's like not very common. Most of the time you put blue and black together or blue and white together and you end up with like good cards and controlling cards, removal, card draw kind of thing. And it can be really exciting when there's an environment where that's not true. And ninjas is a really great place to start there. But, just in general, when I designed my first cube, one of my goals of it, I mean, obviously my cube now isn't like that, but when I first designed it, one of my goals was to have blue be a little bit more creature focused, to keep things a little bit more on the board, a little bit less from your hand. I think I've tried the, blue aggro, quote unquote fish style archetype where I was playing like Phantasmal Bear. It didn't work so well in my classic cube environment, but it's a type of Magic that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, for sure. And I like seeing the blue creatures and the blue decks in Cube that care about combat way more than I like seeing a Mystic Confluence and a Sublime Epiphany. Certainly if we're talking about an unpowered cube where these cards can be far and away more powerful than anything else going on in the cube. And I actually hold ninjas pretty near and dear to my heart. I started playing, like, Legions was the new set, and Mirrodin comes next, but Kamigawa was not that long after. And they used to do kind of a promotion. They weren't promo cards, but before a set would come out, you could go to your local game store and they would just have a stack of a common from the new set. I don't remember this happening for every set, but I do remember for Betrayers of Kamigawa, they just had a stack of Ninja of the Deep Hours. Before I had ever seen the card previewed. The set wasn't out yet, and they were just handing those out to anyone that bought a Magic booster or Magic singles or whatever. And I asked the guy working the counter if I could have 4 of them. He's like, sure, whatever. So I bought a bunch of Ornithopters and stuff, and had this Ornithopter Ninja of the Deep Hours kitchen table Magic deck. And I'll always think very fondly on that experience. But now there's been a few more sets that have ninjas. We go back to the original Kamigawa block, of course, Betrayers being the first set with ninjutsu as a mechanic. We've seen a commander deck with a ninja kind of, I guess it was a ninja commander, not so much a ninja deck, but that's kind of be the nature of what we're talking about today. Ninja's not really a tribal kind of tribe. You tend to play a couple of cards with ninjutsu, and we'll talk about that more as we advance the topic. There's a random ninja in Plane Chase, Sakashima's Student, which is a $50 card now. It's just a
$50 card.
Yeah, it's just a ninja that's a clone. And I don't know. It's a pretty cool card, but it is
a cool card.
Yeah, a pretty limited release with the Plane Chase, and it might have been reprinted in some other small release.
Yeah, there was that set had a bunch of ninjas, right? Were some of them printed in other sets as well? I imagine most of them were. Yeah.
Let's see what Scryfall thinks. I have my list of ninjas here. So Sakashima's Student is in Plane Chase 2012. Wow, that was a long time ago. And Plane Chase Anthology. So that's just the reprint of those Plane Chase decks. And then we have Eureko, the Tiger's Shadow. That one's been printed a bunch, but that was that one? That one has a bunch of reprints, apparently. Apparently, I'm looking at 7 different versions of Eureko, but that one was not from Plane Chase. That was from Commander 2017 or 2018.
Yeah, there's a bunch of sweet ninjas trickled all over the place. Eureko is one of my favorite Magic cards ever printed. I just think what it does is super cool. I tried it in my cube for a while, and the amount of times I was trying to look, it wasn't good, but I so badly wanted to put in, not that I played Ornithopter, but be able to set up a flipping an Emrakul off of my Eureko. And just doming my opponent for 15.
I'm not fancy. I'll take any card. But it's pretty satisfying when Eureko reveals Force of Will.
Yeah.
Because not only does your opponent take 5, but the game's also over because you have a free counter up.
See, that's much better than what I was trying to do with the card.
Yeah, I would try not to put Emrakul in my Eureko deck, but I admire the dream. But then we see ninjas again in the first Modern Horizon set. This where we actually see the most powerful ninja, though probably the least fun ninja. Your opinion might vary. I can see you really liking Fallen Shinobi, actually.
No, honestly, if I'm being fully honest, I think it's one of the most overrated cards in higher powered cubes. It's a good, it has an incredible ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
But generally I like my ninjas to be more efficient than this card is.
Sure.
Just in terms of mana cost.
Yeah, it costs a good chunk of mana. We'll talk about that card more later. I have some strong thoughts, but I'm trying to get through my incredibly lengthy preamble. We come to the upcoming Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set, where we do see at long last the return of ninjas. And I've actually been really pleasantly surprised to see some of the previewed ninjas. We won't talk about every card preview, and we're sure we're going to talk about a lot of these in our set review. But what we're seeing is the ninjas in the new Kamigawa set really pushed in a way where previously a lot of these ninjas, they have mana cost of like 4 or 5 or more. And Ninjutsu makes them cheaper. I guess Eureko is actually pretty cheap. It's only 3 to cast, but you still don't want to cast it because it's a 1/3. It's a little bit tougher to actually cast it, wait a turn, attack, where you would rather use the ninjutsu ability. But some of these ninjas in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, we have a flying man ninja. We have a 1 mana 1/1 flyer, 1000 Face Shadow that has a 4 mana ninjutsu ability, lets you copy another attacking creature. So that's just a cheap body. And I think the one that's getting a lot of attention, certainly for Pauper, and Pauper is the first kind of cube where I really played with ninjas kind of a lot in the cube. Not a lot of ninjas, but the specific ninja cards matter. Like Ninja of the Deep Hours is pretty good in a Pauper cube. Not as good as it used to be. But anyway, some of those Modern Horizons ninjas are quite good. So you probably still see a decent clip of them. But the card that we're going to see definitely a lot of in Pauper constructed and probably in most Pauper cubes is Moon Circuit Hacker, which is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 enchantment creature human ninja. Has ninjutsu blue, so you return an attacking unblocked creature to your hand. So this after blockers are declared if you haven't played with ninjas before. And you put this creature onto the battlefield tapped and attacking in its place. And whenever Moon Circuit Hacker deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, you discard a card unless it entered the battlefield this turn. So the first hit's free. You just draw a card. And then you start looting after the fact. But that first extra card, that's going to put you ahead. And the fact that this is just a 2 mana 2/1 rather than a 4 mana 2/2 in the case of Ninja of the Deep Hours, this is much more exciting. And when we have more of these cheap ninjas, and we do have at least a couple other already previewed, you move the needle more in the direction of actually maybe looking at a tribal deck or a deck with a lot of potential scary ninjutsu effects, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues with ninjas as a deck, right, is that they tend to be very expensive, right? And the way that you know, as you said with Eureko and with Ninja of the Deep Hours, I mean, especially Ninja of the Deep Hours, you really don't want to be casting that card. They get the ability from using, like from effectively having haste for a cheaper cost is what ninjutsu is doing. And so you have some sort of set of enablers and payoffs. And generally, your ninja deck is going to look like a lot more enablers than payoffs, right? You're a generally aggressive blue deck with a bunch of stuff low on the ground, evasive creatures, and then your ninjas are going to be there to like help push you and snowball because it really pushes for a get ahead, stay ahead strategy. Once you ninjutsu in a Eureko or a Ninja of the Deep Hours, you're now gaining card advantage as long as you're ahead on board so that you can be attacking. And so you put yourself in that position, and then if you can stay in that position, you win the game. The problem with those strategies, especially for Cube, is there are only so many efficiently costed ninjas, so more of them is better. And 2, the cards that you're excited about putting in your deck are usually not the enablers, but you need a lot more of them. So having cards that can play both roles of being your 1-drop or your 2-drop, especially I'm very excited about the what is that card? The 1000-Faced Shadow, right? The new one, it's the blue mana, it's the flyman 1/1 flyer that you mentioned with ninjutsu for 4. That's like the perfect card for me because I want to be putting 1 mana 1/1 flyers in my ninjutsu deck, but they're not the cards that I'm actually excited about. I'm excited about the ninjutsu cards, and this one kind of gets to be both.
Definitely. And people like to harp on fire design because people hear fire, they think Fires of Invention, they think Oko, Thief of Crowns, but fire, again, that's what's giving us these rares that are quote unquote pushed. That card's not broken. However, this is a much more powerful implementation of ninjas. And I for one, am here for it.
Oh, me too. But I guess I'm a little biased since I love the mechanic. It's definitely one of my favorite mechanics of all time.
Oh, for sure. And today we're going to be doing our deep dive on ninjas in Cube. So we're going to have 3 different segments after we take our break here. First, we're going to talk about dipping your toes into the deep dive. what's going on, what makes cards in this kind of archetype work, what makes ninjas tick in Cube. Then we're going to go to the shallow end, how you can go about introducing at least a little bit of ninjutsu into your cube. And then we're going to go into the deep end and talk about the most powerful or most pushed, going all the way on this archetype, or putting some ninjas, having them heavily featured and commonly drafted in your cube. So we're going to take our first break, and then we're going to dip our toes into featuring ninjas in Cube.
Hello there from Dominario's Judgment, a weekly podcast for Star City Games with me, Dom Harvey.
And me, Ari Lex.
Where we bring you the latest, greatest, and downright weirdest things Modern has to offer.
Want to know what to expect for next weekend's events? We've got you covered.
Do you want deep breakdowns of the hot topics and decks in Modern? We've got you covered.
Just want to make sure you don't miss the latest nonsense before your opponents teach you a lesson about it in the queues? Oh yeah, we have definitely got you covered. Find us every week on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Or if you want to head over to StarCityGames.com, we'll be right there alongside all the great content from all your other favorite content producers.
All right, welcome back, everyone, into our deep dive on ninjas in Cube. So this is the dipping your toes segment where we kind of get into the bare bones. How do we include ninjas in our cube? So the first big important question, Ryan, what colors can take part in supporting ninjas in Cube?
So generally speaking, you'll be seeing, like, if there's a ninjutsu style deck, it's going to most often be blue-black. However, what I'll say is, in terms of it bleeding into other colors, you mostly see that in blue more so than black. As I mentioned earlier, what really makes this tick is the cheap and evasive creatures, and you get that in more of blue than black when you push it. That's also, I want to say, my experience is slightly biased here from my combat cube. That's a cube where there are 1-mana 1/1 flyers, and I've certainly seen ninjas sort of in all blue decks there, but it is a blue-black theme. I've also seen some really sweet intersections in pauper cubes of ninjutsu in blue-white. Again, it's not meant as the blue-white archetype, but blue-white can be some blink-focused archetype, and you can actually use ninjutsu to gain sort of value as a pseudo flicker, right? You're gaining value from your ninjutsu's ability hitting, and then you replay an enter the battlefield effect. It was some really interesting gameplay where, like, I'm choosing to take more damage and block a Manowar because I do not want that Manowar to be returned to hand. So there's a lot that can go on here, but primarily speaking, when we're talking about like this archetype and supporting this archetype, we're talking about blue-black.
Yeah, before Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, every ninja, changelings notwithstanding, was blue and or black. Though right. We already have one non-blue, non-black ninja previewed. We don't know at this time if we'll see others or how many others we'll see, but we do know that Kappa Tech Wrecker, a turtle ninja for 1 and a green, a 1/3 with ninjutsu for 1 and a green, it enters the battlefield with a death touch counter on it, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a death touch counter from it, and when you do, exile an artifact or enchantment that player controls. So this is a green take on a ninja. It gives you that death touch counter, what makes it a little bit undesirable to block. So in theory, you can use this to ninjutsu other ninjas. And then it gives you a very green ability, a naturalize ability. Though green is probably the least likely color outside of this ninja existing to really end up contributing to a ninja style of deck, at least in my mind. I feel like the gameplay we're talking about for ninjas, creatures with evasion, obviously, like a cheap creature with evasion, 1-mana creature that's difficult to block is something we're very much in the market for. That's why you're talking about this 1-mana 1/1 flying ninja being such a big deal. And beyond that, some way to clear a path or other creatures that grant evasion make a lot of sense. Red's the color is going to give you a lot of cheap creatures, a lot of cheap removal spells. So either something to pick up or some way to clear the way. I like what you were saying about blue ninja decks or a flicker style deck with creatures with good enter the battlefield abilities and wanting to recur those by taking advantage of ninjutsu to return them to your hand. Red doesn't give you so much of that, but at least gives you some unblockability. And there's a few ways that white can materially contribute as well. I think off the top of my head, I mean, this is obviously just a very strong card, but if we're talking about wanting to get through in combat, Mother of Runes is going to be good,
Sure.
both to get your ninja online in the first place and then to keep getting your hits in once it's on the battlefield.
Yeah, absolutely. I will actually say Kappa Tech Wrecker is just, I understand that ninjutsu as a theme in green, it's a little odd and it doesn't play as well as it does with sort of the other colors, as you said, white and red. One of the things that's nice about red is it usually is going to be one of the colors with the highest density of 1-drops. So if you aren't able to get those blue 1-drops or the cube doesn't necessarily support it, a blue-red deck is going to be easiest for turning on your Ninja of the Deep Hours online on turn 2. Especially like if I have a 2/2, I'm not blocking a Monastery Swiftspear attacking on turn 2. So it's interesting, or Soulscar Mage, right? It's interesting that those can get through there. But Kappa Tech Wrecker, right? This green one, are you... Like, this card is something that I feel like I should be looking at for just most of my cubes. If I'm just, it's slight of an aside here, but I'm always looking for, reclamation stages, any ways of interacting with artifacts and enchantments. And like, this is almost like it's worse than it. It gives your opponent kind of the option, kind of like a Punisher card where they can choose to block with it. And well, I'm sure we can have a long discussion about this card during the set review, but I'm curious if Kappa Tech Wrecker is something that you're more interested in sort of a wider suite of cubes.
I think it depends on a couple things. It is an exciting card. I would want the green deck to possibly have an aggressive slant, or I can see this fitting in what you were describing, some extension of a Flicker style deck. For example, it seems really powerful to return Eternal Witness to your hand to ninjutsu your Kappa Tech Wrecker. You have to do some other things to make it work, but similar just to Dimir ninjas or just including any creatures with ninjutsu in your cube, I'm imagining a cube that's heavily about combat and has ways to clear paths and get a hit in some evasive creatures. And I imagine that's going to extend to green. Yeah, if we're saying that we want to make blue more interesting, make it more about combat, which would be as opposed to counter spells, control magics, those really disruptive effects. We're probably also saying that the green fast mana is pretty disruptive and not as engaging. So I can see this fitting into the same style of cubes where we're trying to make things more about combat for all the same reasons we're making blue about ninjas. We can make green dip into that as well. That makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah.
It just generally, we want the cube to be more about combat if we're going to include ninjas. And kind of the broad question we ask when we do these early looks during our deep dives, what kind of cards make this archetype work? Now, you can go to Scryfall, you can look for creature type ninja, and by the time you hear this, you're going to be deeper into preview season. There's going to be more hits. Currently, I'm looking at 33 cards that are ninjas on my Scryfall search. But that's not the full picture, is it, Ryan?
No. There's, it's the full picture in terms of cards with literal ninjutsu. But in terms of cards that you need to support this, right? We've mentioned, why we were so excited about the 1-mana 1/1 flyer that has ninjutsu now. But I'm a huge fan of Fairy Seer, which is a 1-mana 1/1 flyer in blue that when it enters the battlefield, scry 2. Right, Scry 2, it's not like, I have it in my combat cube where you're not supposed to be able to gain card advantage unless you're in combat. Scry 2 isn't card advantage. I mean, if you Scry 2 like 3 times, it kind of feels like card advantage sometimes. But, that card has always been really impressive. I don't remember if it was the best blue common, but it might have ended up being the best blue common in Modern Horizons draft just because of how powerful ninjutsu is. And that's kind of the point. Is there's this extra sort of suite of cards that are cheap evasive creatures, which I think is what you were getting at there.
Cheap evasive creature is definitely part of it. My favorite ninja, actually, it doesn't come up on the Scryfall search. It's Changeling Outcast.
Oh, sure. Yes.
I consider that one very important. Kind of what you were talking about, blue giving you a lot of ninja support. when it comes to supporting ninjas in black, you do kind of look for more specific cards. Especially if we're focusing on creatures to ninjutsu back. And in particular, Changeling Outcast is nice because it's an unblockable creature, and some of those Modern Horizons ninjas, Ingenious Infiltrator, has attacks whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So that one gives you the first hit, but then it's a 2/3, doesn't have any evasion. However, you recommit your Changeling Outcast, that one can draw cards. And Eureko the Tiger's Shadow is also whenever a ninja you control deals damage to a player. So I really like having Changeling Outcast. That's my pick for a card that I always want to see if you have ninjutsu going on in a cube.
Sweet. I knew about the Modern Horizons one, but I did not know Eureko had the same text as well. So that's sweet.
Yeah, they're a little funky to have both of those in the same cube, but I have done it because I think ninjas are sweet. And you tend to have all these things going on in your cube. Your cheap evasive creatures wanting to ninjutsu something to start getting that card advantage, and or having some creatures with enter the battlefield abilities you want to recur. So right. Just having some redundancy there makes a lot of sense, and it's going to be easier when we start seeing these more efficient ninjas in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. But then there's another piece of the puzzle, and that's making your ninjas can continue to connect. I alluded to Mother of Runes, though the archetype's largely going to be centered in blue and black. So a big part of it then is having a solid black removal suite. Well, that's true of most any cube. But ninjas also make it more inviting to have some kind of dumpy bounce spells. Like, oh yeah. I actually really like the idea. I'm usually pretty cold on Vapor Snag. I think that some people get rose-colored glasses about that card being good because it was good with Snapcaster Mage in Standard, when Snapcaster Mage was the best card in the format. And Vapor Snag was getting pretty heavily subsidized. However, I really like getting up to Vapor Snag when I have Ninja the Deep Hours and other Ophidian style effects going on.
I'm 100% there with you. I also, I have a soft spot for Misplayed Shinobi. For people who don't know, Misplayed Shinobi is a ninja. It's 3 mana for a 1/1. So pretty terrible rate with ninjutsu for a single blue. It says whenever Misplayed Shinobi deals combat damage to a player, you may return target creature that player controls to its owner's hand. Is it the best card? Absolutely not. But it really does pay you off for being able to simply clear the way. And it's a terrifying presence. Like, does your opponent have to leave back multiple blockers? Because if they try and race and you remove their single blocker and bounce whatever they attacked with, well, now they're losing the race. They recommit something, you interact again, the game just ends. And I do really think that Ninjas provides like a really interesting point of tension that lets you look to make card disadvantageous plays in order to get ahead on board, right? Misplayed Shinobi screams to tell you to do that, and unsummoned variants like Vapor Snag are exactly the types of cards that you should be looking at.
Mm-hmm. And then...
one more thing about bounce spells. A card that I think 99% of people designing a cube with ninjutsu are going to miss, that I adore, is Sidisi's Faithful. Do you know that card?
I do, yeah, from Dragons of Tarkir.
Yeah. So Sidisi's Faithful is 1 mana for an 0/4 with Exploit to bounce a creature. Note that it doesn't have a defender. So you can actually ninjutsu it back to your hand. If it's unblocked. It's a bounce spell that, you don't need instant speed bounce spells if you're talking about ninjutsu, right? Like, to get your ninjutsu going, you can just, play the Faithful, sack it to itself, bounce something to clear the way. But you can also play it as an 0/4 blocker to either have you win the race, or simply mean if you have more attackers than your opponent has blockers, you get to ninjutsu with it as well.
Nice. That's a fun one. I like that. So we have ninjas we want to have in our cube, obviously, some evasive creatures, at the very least, cheap creatures. Sidisi's Faithful being a nice shout out there. So we have something to ninjutsu back, some removal or at least bounce spells to clear the way. So these are kind of the bare bones. How do we get ninjas in our cube? How do we make them meaningfully a part of the cube? And the last note I want to make, I've touched on this point a little bit, but it's also important if you want to make blue about combat. I see blue creatures show up in some cubes as an afterthought, where they say, all right, I got all the blue strong cards I want. Here's something else to round out the list. I guess every other color has cheap creatures. Here's some cheap creatures that no one's ever going to play because they don't go in the same decks as the powerful blue cards. I think it's really important if you want to make blue get into combat in the cube to make sure you're not including a lot of historically powerful game state agnostic blue cards. Sublime Epiphany just has really dampened a lot of the digital cube experiences for me. Just putting control magic in just like any old cube, unless it's quite high power level, can be incredibly disruptive. And the more you can have just these blue good stuff decks, the less excited you are about the idea of trying to attack and block with your blue deck.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo that almost exactly, right? Like, why would you want to look? If you look at the history of Magic, and you could have anything at your disposal, why would you ever choose to play a 1-mana 1/1 flyer? There's, especially if you're blue, it's just like, it's not. Unless the answer, there's actually a good answer to that, because you think it's fun, and you know what, enjoy yourself. But like, if you're cultivating a cube where you want that fun thing to also be enticing, you can't also provide all of the historically best things that Magic has had to offer.
Mm-hmm. And that's a phrase I really like for cube design. Make the fun thing the good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you really dampen the excitement. You really ruin the fun if you have someone that's excited to play with the 1-mana 1/1 flyer and they just play against all Vidalcan Shackles, what's that card do? There's a lot of ways to make it pointless to try to attack and block with your blue deck.
Yeah, as just a little, let's take a little side note for a story. Do you remember what were they called? Inventions? Or when, sets used to have like absolutely crazy, the extra
the
level
masterpiece
of rares.
Series?
Masterpieces. So I won what was it? Like a PPTQ, or maybe solely because I opened the card Vidalcan Shackles in limited, like retail limited, in a format that also had an uncommon that tutored for 3-cost artifacts. So I had 2 copies of Vidalcan Shackles in my deck. Now, my deck was also very good. It had Heart of Kirin, a pretty great mythic vehicle. And I remember I was playing against Abe Corrigan at the semis of this PVTQ. And he looked at me and he actually asked me, he's like, I don't know what to do here. I have my disenchant. I sideboarded in my disenchant because of your Vidalcan Shackles. And you just played a turn 2 Heart of Kirin. Am I supposed to not disenchant your Heart of Kirin? Because I know you have 2 copies of Vidalcan Shackles. It's almost an awe. I play a 2-mana 4/4 flyer, and my opponent may not use their sideboard card to kill it, because that's how good Vidalcan Shackles is if you place it in like a environment that is about combat.
Yep. No, absolutely. And that's a competitive environment. On some level, you're going to just end up in those situations invariably. And as a competitor, you really want to be in that spot where it's like, yeah, nobody can touch me. This is awesome. But that sucks in casual games.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are the dipping your toes lessons and insights on introducing ninjas to your cube. We're going to take another break and we'll be back to talk about the shallow end and introducing some ninjas to your cube, taking those first steps.
The 540 is brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. Go to coalesceapparel.shop for the coolest MTG apparel out there. From shirts to hoodies to stickers, they got you. Save 10% at checkout with gift code SCG. Hate mulliganing? Me too. Join me as part of the Anti-Mulligan Mulligan Club. Think math is for blockers? Rep the alphas at Attack University. And don't forget to save 10% at checkout with gift code SEG. Coalesce Apparel and Design. No one made what they wanted, so they made it themselves.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time to jump into the shallow end and talk about introducing some ninjas into your cube experience. So the question we like to start with here in our deep dives is, what cards might already be in my cube that support ninjas already?
Well, this is one of the archetypes that, generally speaking, I feel like the best cards for it tend not to be in cubes already. That doesn't mean that they're usually, at least, and you can correct me if you think you disagree here, they're usually like right on the outskirts of cards that you like could play, but generally there are better things for it. Overall, what you can say is that there are some like generally good evasive creatures that already exist that you're playing, but they're usually not linearized for ninjutsu. Like you're not playing your 1-mana 1/1 flyers. Maybe you have a Terramander, maybe a Delver of Secrets if that's something that you're pushing, although it doesn't usually clash so well when you start supporting ninjas. But something like a Looteril Core or any just general evasive creatures, what I'd say that most cubes already do have is cheap interaction. Cheap interaction is one of the first things that you sort of look at when you look at a cube to just sort of see, like, what can I expect the pace of the game to look like? How efficient are the interactive spells? Are the interactive spells so efficient with respect to the threats that I should be leaning on, less combat? Are they inefficient with respect to the threats, so I should be leaning on more combat? Those are the kinds of questions I ask myself often when I'm looking at a cube list. And similarly, I would say that most cubes are going to already have a suite of efficient removal that's going to help push ninjas forward.
Yeah, I actually really agree with everything you said there, where you're going to have to add the best cards for this archetype. You probably don't have almost any of them. What you're going to have are those kind of staple cards, your black removal spells. You might have some blue bounce spells, but there's a good chance you need to do some reskinning there. Like off the top of my head, like Repeal is still kicking in the Magic Online Vintage Cube. However, that checks a different box than Vapor Snag.
Very different.
If you want to get a ninja going, you don't want to spend all of your mana on the bounce spell. You got to have a little left over to actually trigger the ninjutsu. So I do like blink of an eye into the Royal. If you have those in your cube, those can play pretty well. And those have that added bonus where you can kick them if you have the mana, and then they're not just kind of bad when you're not doing your thing. But you're probably going to be looking at cutting some of those really very powerful blue cards, making room for some of those cheap evasive creatures, and of course making room for the ninjas. And a lot of cubes just don't have any ninjas, and cubes that do, it tends to be that Fallen Shinobi. At least we're talking about the Magic Online cubes. And that one's not necessarily the experience that we're going for.
No, I mean, it's the big flashy boom boom plays that you get to see and get to be excited about in Vintage Cube, but you usually don't get to see that type of impact in more combat oriented environments.
Right. Yeah, that's one where I feel like that card is really at home in Vintage Cube, where it has this high ceiling, swingy, potentially game ending effect. And in Vintage Cube, it's nice because it asks you to attack with the creature. And it's like, oh, that's kind of unconventional. I hadn't thought about attacking with the creature before. So it kind of pushes you a little bit in that direction with the promise that you'll win some percent of those games on the spot. But then you put it in Legacy Cube and it's like, overwhelmingly, you're playing a deck that does attack. And then some of the games start to end on the spot. And the more you scale it back, the idea of that being like a modern power level cube, come on. I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, although if you go far enough, like again, I said I'd mention this a lot, but if you go into my combat cube, for example, I do legitimately believe that Fallen Shinobi is would not be great in my combat cube. It would be a good playable card, but I think it's worse than Ingenious Infiltrator as an example. Just because like 5 mana to, most decks in that queue don't really want to go above 15, let alone 16 lands. So 5 mana is already pushing it. So you're only ever really going to be able to cast it as the sort of 4 mana ninjutsu mode. And yes, if you do it, you can get a big swing, but you're going to be getting like, the average CMC of decks is like 2, maybe even less than 2 sometimes.
Yeah, you have some effects that are undesirable too, where it's like, I hit your giant growth.
Right.
Or whatever.
So overall, you'd just rather be like lean and mean instead of, explosive in that kind of space. But I do think like basically the way that I would put Fallen Shinobi, the way that I feel about it is mostly like, how excited am I about 6 mana cards in the cube in general, right? If we're talking like a modern power level cube where I'm like jamming Titans and enjoying it, then the impact from Fallen Shinobi in terms of the expectation of what decks do and what you can hit off of it is a little overwhelming. But on either end of sort of the other side of the spectrum, whether it's something novel like my combat cube where everything's low average, or something like Vintage Cube where generally speaking my blue-black decks don't want to have enough creatures to enable it, it ends up falling off a little bit, or at least becoming high enough variance that I am less interested in, is a better way of putting it.
Yeah, and I also reiterate the point that to the extent that it's very powerful, it does ask a blue and black drafter to try to attack.
Yes.
Which is somewhat desirable because
Sure.
that's not always an element of Vintage Cube decks.
Yeah, I can buy it as like a nice, powerful thing to put into a cube for diversity purposes, right? One of my favorite episodes that we've done so far is the one on diversity and redundancy. And Fallen Shinobi is actually an example of a pretty just generically good, powerful card that actually fosters diversity in what Dimir decks look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we say, when we talk about adding ninjas to a cube, what cards did you add? Of course, ninjas. Hello. Ways to get creatures through. That can be evasive creatures. You can also start to look at if you're going for like a popper environment where I think it's very easy to slot ninjas in, and because you're only working with so much of the card pool, it's easier to justify blue getting into combat. Then you can start to look at some creatures that tap to give other creatures evasion, or even just some kind of like pump spell, like Kabuto Moth can play pretty well in a ninjutsu deck because it makes blocking undesirable.
Yep. And once you start doing that, you can then look to add just like general Ophidian style creatures. I don't mean literal Ophidian. I think that's fallen a little bit too far behind. But there are quite a few creatures that like on attacking or on hit do something desirable. And the more you tune your cube to let ninjutsu shine, the more those cards are going to be able to also shine. Similarly to those, something that I still haven't found the right balance in my combat cube, but as we've sort of said, there's sort of 2 poles to what your ninjutsu deck needs in terms of creatures, right? You have the cheap evasive ones, and then you have your payoff from your ninjutsu spells. And what actually functions almost similarly to using the ninjutsu ability is an enchantment like Curiosity, or what's the one? There's one that like is Misplayed Shinobi, right? It like makes it sleep something. It makes it so that when you hit, you return a creature.
Sigil of Sleep?
Sigil of Sleep, that's it, right? It's blue for an enchantment. Aura, that's when the enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, it bounces. You get to return a creature to their owner's hand.
Man, you are lucky I pulled that one out. That card came out like 5 years before I started playing and was never very good.
Yeah. But the point being is if you actually use one of those auras on an evasive creature, it's almost exactly like ninjutsu, right? You use it because the thing's going to be unblocked, right? So you attack, it hits, you get the ability, and then you have the creature on the board still that has this ability. So something that I found is it's actually it doesn't feel as fun. It's a little bit, you're more open to getting 2-for-1, right? Because when you ninjutsu the creature, you still have it in your hand. But also usually the ninjas don't have evasion. So you ninjutsu your Misplayed Shinobi, but it's a 1/1 and it can't naturally get through. Versus when you put Sigil of Sleep on a flyer, it may just that can just like really have a strong impact on the game. So I'm not saying it's necessarily a good idea, but it is, especially for larger cubes that are trying to support this, a way of getting some added redundancy and another axis to play on.
Yeah, that's exactly the note that I was going to make. Once your cube gets to be like a 540 or greater size, and you want to have some of this stuff and make sure there's some consistency going up and down the blue column in your cube, or making sure that the ninja style decks exist there, that can be a way to add redundancy. Curious Obsession has very similar play patterns, so you mentioned slightly different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah,
and I actually want to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I will say that I do intend with this set's update to probably trim a lot of those enchantments from my combat cube. They have felt awkward. It's been a little bit with respect to removal, but that is also one of the like leanest, meanest 360 environments you're going to think of. And so that's not to say that I don't believe that those kinds of enchantments have a home.
For sure. And then I want to pick your brain about one more card.
Sure.
You mentioned Looter Ilkor by name, and that one I've always liked for ninjas, certainly in Pauper Cube, because you can see that ninjutsuing Looter out to put Ninja of the Deep Hours in, at least for that turn, is an upgrade.
Sure.
You're dealing an extra point of damage, you're drawing, not looting. What are your thoughts on Suspicious Stowaway if you're supporting ninjas?
The Suspicious Stowaway is the flip one that is Looter Ilkor, but flips into the draw card.
Yeah, so it's kind of Looter Ilkor on the front side, can't be blocked, loots when it hits. On the back side, it's a 2/1 that can't be blocked, that you do fully draw a card.
So, I mean, generally, so most of the time you wouldn't be ninjutsuing the flipped version back to your hand. Is that sort of like the point here is like, unlike Looter Ilkor,
yeah, the nature of the question is obviously you're not going to be ninjutsuing the backside, but then there's also the question, would you rather ninjutsu something or just let this thing transform?
Oh, I guess because the point there is that ninjutsu is sort of acting at a, wait a second, return unblocked. Isn't ninjutsu not casting a card? So doesn't ninjutsu...
Well, I mean, if you specifically ninjutsu out the Suspicious Stowaway, you have to cast it again.
Sure. So actually it makes me more excited, but it makes me more excited not because I'm going to ninjutsu it. Basically, what I feel related to, at least in my experience with cubes that support ninjutsu as a mechanic, something that I think is important, especially because there are only so many ninjas and there are only so many good ninjas, is having other cards that have similar play patterns to help build cohesive decks that are not specific to exactly Dimir. You know, one of the things that can get you to, play with the ninjutsu cards in other colors is cards in other colors that have the Ophidian style play pattern to them. That tension in combat where you have value on attack, you want to have as many cheap interactive parts as you can, and there's this weird push and pull that the opponent has on, do I attack, do I not? How many blockers do I leave back? You know, what does this race look like? What's more important, damage or the fact that my opponent can draw some cards? It's a lot of really intense questions to ask around combat that makes the game pretty tight, pretty hard. Mm-hmm. And having something like Suspicious Stowaway that can flip, right, and play a similar role as, an Ophidian is something that I find exciting. And what pushes it over the top for me is like, I can actually like play a 1-drop, play my Suspicious Stowaway, and turn 3, I can ninjutsu in a creature, right? I can ninjutsu in a Mist Syndicate Naga for 3 or a Moonblade Shinobi for 3, and my Suspicious Stowaway will flip, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
so that's pretty cool.
You can't counter a ninjutsuing in because it's not a spell. Yeah, so you both got to the hidden synergy kudos for that. And then I like the discussion there also about this style of card just plays really well with the supporting cast, even if you're not necessarily playing the ninja cards. We're making some heavy modifications to our cube to include these cards. There's only so many of them. So just getting some more similar stuff actually goes a long way in facilitating these play patterns, even if it's not these specific cards. And then you do have that upside with the specific cards as well. So a lot to like.
And ninjutsu has some like pretty wild play patterns too, right? Because you can ninjutsu after damage, right? As long as the creature was unblocked.
Yeah, and there's also when you have a couple of ninjas and your opponent is leaving up a removal spell, but like they're waiting to see the good target, you can actually just ninjutsu again.
Yeah, right. They can't kill they can't kill it until after the combat step.
Right.
And you can also do some let's say Misplayed Shinobi is an example of a card that the 1/1 sitting on the battlefield doesn't really do anything, but it can be pretty terrifying and impossible for your opponent to come back if that one is always going to hit, and it's only 1 mana in ninjutsu. So you could always there are play patterns where you could ninjutsu for 1 mana in the Misplayed Shinobi, hit, bounce the creature. At the end of combat, but before your second main phase, you have another ninja that you just put in to have a body, so the Misplayed Shinobi is back in your hand. And then the next turn, your opponent, sure, they can replay a creature, but one of your creatures is always going to get through, and you can do the exact same thing. You can just sort of shuffle the ninja so that you get the combat damage trigger from the Shinobi, but the Shinobi stays in your hand and the other ninja stays on the battlefield.
Yeah, some really tricky and fun stuff to do. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of including ninjas in Cube, and I am excited for all the new ninjas.
Oh, yeah, especially the cheap ones. The Moon Circuit Hacker is going to be my favorite card in the set, probably.
Yeah, the combination of cheap to cast and cheaper to ninjutsu, like the 1 blue to ninjutsu, that's a game changer for sure. And you're going to start seeing more of those tricks be possible in Cube, which is awesome. All right. Do you have any other notes about introducing ninjutsu to your cube before we start talking about going all in and really pushing the archetype?
I'll just reiterate that I have loved Sidisi's Faithful alongside ninjutsu, and it's not a thing that I have seen other people do. So I just want to make sure that is heard.
All right. Noted. We're going to take our final break, and then we're diving into the deep end.
Look, you're listening to the 540 podcast. I know you have cubes and new ideas and cards on the side you'd love to turn into something new and shiny. If you're looking to sell your Magic the Gathering cards, it's never been easier. Visit starcitygames.com/sell with a 30% store credit bonus and the fastest turnaround time in the industry. There's no reason to sell to anybody else. Enjoy 4 convenient ways to sell. Check out our buy list. Ship your cards to us. You can come to us. But also, if you have over 500,000 cards you're looking to sell or own a store and want to sell off that bulk, we'll come to you. Go to starcitygames.com/sell now for more information.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time to dive into the deep end on our deep dive on ninjas here on the 540. We are pushing ninjas to their extreme. So we've made some notes. Something we'd like to talk about here is overlapping archetypes. And that's how you really deeply embed a strategy into your cube. You mentioned Blink. I like that example. Just any kind of flicker style archetype where you have a bunch of creatures that enter the battlefield, abilities. That's going to make a lot of sense. You can return them to your hand. We've also just talked about cheap creatures a lot. Cheap creatures that can attack. Not necessarily aggressive creatures. Shout out to Sidisi's Faithful. Just cheap creatures that can attack. Are there other overlapping archetypes you can think of?
Cheap creatures that can attack and flicker. I mean, those are the main ones. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I haven't thought of before. I mean, I'll say that it's not even necessarily cheap creatures that can attack. It's almost the intersection of those two things is literally the card Manowar, right? Mm-hmm. It's is it a cheap creature? No. Is it some crazy value to flicker? No. But it does feel that we were talking about on summons earlier and their importance. And so maybe there is some way of saying a slightly aggressive archetype that really cares about Manowar may really help elevate something related to ninjas, but I feel like I'm grasping at straws here.
Sure. And I think we'll stick to the broad point that a cube that cares about the combat step
Yes.
is really what we're looking for. And as long as your archetypes at least loosely check that box, I think that's what we're in the market for. And that kind of segues very naturally into the question, what kinds of cubes is this good for? It seems that cubes with some focus on combat is going to be our answer.
Right. And generally speaking, that's going to be lower powered cubes. Like naturally, you get that from most pauper cubes. I don't know if I've drafted a pauper cube that didn't feel like most games were about combat.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, usually you do see things like Ninja of the Deep Hours and Misplayed Shinobi in, or not Misplayed Shinobi, sorry, Moonblade Shinobi is the one that I've seen more in pauper cubes. But yeah, so any cube that's going to be about combat, I think there's a way of sort of easily incorporating ninjutsu. And I think cubes of higher power level that can be shifted to be a little bit leaner, a little bit more about combat, maintain their power level, and still have ninjutsu be a theme.
For sure. Makes sense. Then our next question, what can we do to really push this archetype over the top? I think my answer is actually kind of roundabout here, but what are your thoughts on this? Making sure that somebody is happy to regularly draft ninjas in our cube.
Yeah, I would say that the real thing to do here is how can you create an environment in which the cheap evasive creatures are actually enticing, just generally. I think to me that's what pushes this to be something really exciting. Because from my perspective, when I think about an archetype being exciting, it's not about when I put the cards together in a deck. I also need to feel like I'm making good decisions during the draft to get there. Mm-hmm. And if I feel as though an archetype, I can only make good decisions during the draft to get there if I pack one, pick one Eureko and say I'm going to do that, to me, that doesn't push anything over the top, right? And the problem with the general structure of the ninjutsu deck is we were talking like, yes, there's removal, but there are all of these kind of pieces that it's easy to have a cube that where nobody really wants those pieces except for the ninja deck, to the point where it's a little too parasitic. Which is why we say like it's good for cubes where combat matters and lower powered cubes, because a lot of these things generally are going to be better when all of the games are going to care about some presence on the board. So what I'll say is what pushes the archetype over the top is if you can figure out how to create a cube environment in which something like Fairy Seer, a 1-mana, 1/1 flyer that has a relatively good enter the battlefield effect. I mean, it's Scry 2. So like the difference between that and Ponder is you replace draw a card with a 1/1 flyer. And so any cube that is going to be able to change itself to make that card playable in more than just one archetype, that to me is what really pushes ninjutsu to be exciting.
Yeah, completely agree. It's more about what you exclude than what you include. You have to include the volume. You have to make sure that the Fairy Seer is there. Then you have to make it appealing. And some of that is removing a lot of those game state agnostic cards, those cards that can generate value outside of combat, and making combat something inviting to engage in, even for your blue decks. And then I would also give partial credit to simply adding Fallen Shinobi to your cube.
Yep.
And then on that line, what are the most powerful cards to support ninjas in cube?
I think we're both going to agree with this. It's the free spells, right? Like the fact of the matter is these are the ones that you're already in. Well, some of them like Force of Will, you're already including Snuff Out, Force of Negation, and some Force of Vigor. Basically, the point is you're usually spending a lot of mana on your own turn as the ninjutsu player to sort of jockey yourself for position and end up ahead on cards, ahead on board, in sort of the driver's seat. And then you pass the turn and your opponent could easily retake that driver's seat. And the way you put a nail in the coffin there is with those force of wills, those snuff outs, to just sort of say, hey, no, I get to stay in the driver's seat.
For sure. Did you know that Daze is banned and Pauper constructed?
No, I don't know if I could name a single card on the Pauper constructed ban list.
Well, now you can. You can name Daze.
Yeah, you're right. I can.
A lot of that is it being a 0 mana card that really helps facilitate your Ninja of the Deep Hours turn. It's not a ban I necessarily agree with. I won't get into it. However, the free spells in environments where people play ninjas, definitely a huge part. Yep. If you don't know the card Snuff Out, it is an awesome card that it's somewhat forgotten, unfortunately, today. It's 3 and a black for an instant, destroy target non-black creature. It might be non-black, non-artifact. I actually don't know for sure. But you can cast it for 0 mana by paying 4 life if you control a swamp. And I put a ninja theme in a cube that was largely about combat. And the deck was really fun to play in draft. But I found after playing not too many games that Snuff Out, like having access to Snuff Out, either to remove the only blocker to set up a ninja turn, or to have that once I have my ninja on the table to make it really difficult for my opponent to block, and then like leaving up a counterspell, made a lot of the games easy. So as is the nature of free spells, they can be very busted in facilitating ninjas.
That they can. I mean, just kind of busted in general. But yeah, I mean, that's why, the question was, what's the most powerful card in this archetype? Free spells are generally very powerful. You generally already have them. But given the play patterns of this type of deck, they really take it to the next level.
Definitely. And then our last question before we close today's discussion: what is the degree of difficulty for including ninjas? And we'll change the phrasing a little bit, for including ninjas in a desirable way into a queue where you would want to regularly play with them. And we still don't have like a good system for this, but we'll say on a scale of 1 to 10.
So it's hard to answer this even on a scale of 1 to 10, because it almost depends on what type of cube we're talking about, right? Like I think it's pretty easy to include it in this way in a Pauper cube, and pretty hard in a vintage cube. Mm-hmm. I think generally speaking, I would go somewhere around 4 out of 10 in terms of, is 0 out of 10 really hard, or is 10 out of 10 really hard?
10 out of 10 is really hard.
Oh, okay. Then I go 6 out of 10, probably 6.5. Like it's not exactly in the middle there, and it's more hard than it is easy. But if you're in the right environment, the hoops you need to jump through aren't crazy.
Yeah, I largely agree. I was going to go with 7 out of 10. And the big reason, even if you love ninjas and you put them in their cube, the big barrier that a lot of cube designers have is they just cling with their lives to some of the really powerful blue cards. I like these cards too. And that makes it more difficult for ninjas to really do their thing. But if you do have an aggressively minded cube, it's just kind of easy to make it go. The trick is your cube has to incentivize blue decks to be aggressive.
Yeah.
And that can be quite difficult.
But I also find it, at least myself as a designer, quite rewarding. It gives people an experience they don't usually get to have. And honestly, I think the gameplay surrounding ninjutsu and its tension in combat is some of the most compelling gameplay in Magic. But it's also like the type of gameplay that I like. So
yeah, I'm absolutely on the same page there. I think that it leads to really fun games, and you're still doing a lot of the powerful things. You're still drawing extra cards. You're using your Misplayed Shinobi. You're still policing your opponent's battlefield. It's still very much blue. It's just that you have to declare attackers.
And it almost snowballs in a way that I feel like it is okay. I feel like, generally speaking, snowballing can feel pretty demoralizing from the other side. But because this is like, it's snowballing in which you are playing creatures and have to get into combat with those creatures to snowball, it almost feels like you're trying to hold on to the game, and like you feel from your side playing ninjas that your opponent could take the reins at any point, and your opponent feels like they have outs in their deck to take the reins back. And that that creates a good experience, as opposed to, where, many planeswalkers or other things in lower powered cubes that can feel like they're snowballing in a more helpless way.
Yeah, especially if we're talking about the Ninja of the Deep Hours category,
Right.
really even going up to Eureko. Like, Fallen Shinobi survives a lot of removal spells, so that one's kind of out on that front. But if you're under a Ninja of the Deep Hours, like a Lightning Bolt gets you out, or at least removes some of the pressure.
Right. And, you're already probably behind by a bit, but you can come back. I mean, you're right that there's some like Misplayed, whatever it is, Fallen Shinobi could give a battlefield presence that's like hopeless. Miss Syndicate Naga, if you have a turn before there's 4 3/1s that you need to kill all 4. So, they can snowball, but that's kind of just, someone's got to win sometime, right?
Yeah. And at least the first time you see that one, it is novel.
Right.
It's a blue creature that's attacking and copying itself. And it's pretty blockable and pretty killable. Some environments that's going to be too much. And that's certainly up to the individual cube and the play groups. And yeah, I mean, cube again, it's all about what you want to do. And for Ryan Saxe, for myself, ninjas is something that we want to do.
Oh yeah. Actually, wait, before we end, that leads to an interesting question. Is Miss Syndicate Naga in a vacuum a faster clock than Goblin Rabblemaster? Because it's really weird to me if there exists a blue card that has a faster clock than Goblin Rabblemaster at the same mana. But
so it doubles every turn. So it's
so
3,
it's
then 6, then 9,
12.
or 12. Sorry,
12. Yeah,
with that. So that's 21. And Rabblemaster doesn't go up quite that quickly.
Right, so it's 1,
yep.
1,
then
6.
Yep.
Then 3,
Then
then
8.
Then 11, right? No. It doesn't pump the other thing. So then 8. Yeah, it's fast. Technically it's a faster clock than Rabblemaster.
And it to the extent that you can consider ninjutsuing haste,
yeah,
it could have haste. It does rely on the other creature to start on turn 3.
Right, that is true. Where Rabblemaster you can play on a blink. I mean, I'm not saying it is a better aggressive card than Goblin Rabblemaster. It's not. but I just had the thought where it just kind of blew my mind. Where, let's say you took me 2 years ago and they were like, hey, or whenever it was printed, I don't know, 3 years ago, and you said, hey, Ryan, this year WotC's going to print a 3 mana blue creature that presents a faster clock than Goblin Rabblemaster. It's hard for me to imagine the world in which I'd believe that. But
why? It's blue. Blue does everything.
You're right. You're right. You're right, and I'm wrong.
That is some good notes about Mist Syndicate Naga, because that's a card that I didn't play Modern Horizons Limited. It's not really my scene, and I see that card. I think it's kind of sweet, but I definitely see, in having this discussion with you, how that could be overwhelming in an unfun way in some limited environments and some cube environments. So some really good notes there.
Yeah, I've conceded with that card on the stack before. But
yeah, I buy it. Especially because it only costs 3.
It's
turn 3, you're only ready for so much.
I miss my 2-drop, and I can play a 3-drop to block or a removal spell, but then they keep duplicating.
Yeah, not great. But ninjas are great.
Yes, they are.
Definitely love seeing ninjas in cube. This has been our deep dive on ninjas. Next week, we should have our full preview for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. We'll be tackling white and blue cards. We already know about a couple ninjas in the set. Excited to see how many more we get. And I expect to see those in plenty more cubes as they have gotten more efficient in this iteration, which is awesome. I am Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. You can find my articles weekly on StarCityGames.com. This week, kind of a big one, something I've been sitting on. I had to not tip my hand too much in our modular cube discussion here on the 540, but it's a modular tubert with 4 modules
Ooh.
I call the Hypercube.
That's exciting.
Check that one out if you've enjoyed the modular Tubert discussion, or if you haven't, because I still appreciate you reading my articles anyway, and it'd be awesome if you did. Ryan Saxe, where can we find you?
Y'all, you can find me at, oh no, did I forget my Twitter handle again? 1 second. Okay, yeah, I got it. You can find me at RC Saxe on Twitter, and also I am starting this coming week writing up again for StarCityGames.com. I usually take a break at the end of a limited format just to, people read less about limited at the end of the format. So now with Neon Dynasty starting this Thursday, but generally I'll write twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. You can find content about the most recent limited format, which will be about Neon Dynasty moving forward.
All right, you stuck the landing. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And we would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the 540 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. That'd be awesome. Leave a comment. Feed the algorithm. Thanks again for listening. And we'll be back next week for the first installment of our Kamigawa Neon Dynasty Cube review. We'll talk to you then.